Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're diving deep into something pretty major happening in the Russia-Ukraine war.
Yeah, things are getting pretty intense over there.
We've got this article we're looking at, and let me tell you, it's packed with info almost too much.
It's really a lot to process.
So we're here to break it all down, figure out what's important, what it means, the whole deal.
And trust me, there are some seriously wild things happening. Like, we're talking North Korean troops fighting in Ukraine, and even Trump's election victory could have ripple effects.
It's crazy, right?
Absolutely. This is like next level geopolitics in action, and the consequences are going to be felt for a long time.
All right, so let's get into it. The big news in the article is that Biden just gave the okay for Ukraine to use these ATACMS missiles. They're supplied by the U.S., but up until now, Ukraine wasn't allowed to actually use them.
And these aren't just any missiles. We're talking about the Army Tactical Missile System.
ATACMS.
ATACMS, got it.
And these things can hit targets up to 300 kilometers away.
Wow, that's a serious distance. It is. And that's exactly why the U.S. has been hesitant to give Ukraine the green light to use them. The worry was that it could be seen as escalating the conflict, poking the bear. But now, with this decision, a lot of Russian military bases and supply lines are suddenly within Ukraine's reach.
So why the sudden change? What made the U.S. decide to switch things up?
Well, the article says there's been a ton of pressure from Ukraine and its allies.
Makes sense.
They're arguing that Ukraine needs these long-range missiles to really defend itself against Russia's attacks. Basically, they're saying, look, we need to be able to hit back and hit back hard.
I mean, it's got to be a game changer for them, right? Being able to strike that far into Russian territory.
It could be, yeah. Disrupting Russia's military operations, forcing them to rethink their strategy, it's definitely possible. But it's also a risky move on Biden's part.
How so?
Well, Russia has made it very clear that they won't tolerate any attacks on their own soil. So this could easily spiral into a much bigger conflict.
Okay, so we've got this potential turning point with the missiles. But then the article throws in this other bombshell. North Korean troops are fighting in Ukraine, on Russia's side.
Yeah, about 12,000 of them have been deployed along the northern border. The goal seems to be helping Russia retake some of the territory they lost to Ukraine.
It's just surprising. Where did this even come from?
Nobody really saw it coming.
Yeah.
And it's not just about North Korea lending a hand to Russia. There are deeper motivations at play here.
Like what?
Well, by getting involved, North Korea tightens its bond with Russia. They might get access to resources they desperately need, and it gives them more leverage on the world stage, when it comes to future negotiations and stuff.
North Korean troops in Europe, fighting in a war against a Western-backed country. It's mind-boggling.
It really shows you how the dynamics of global alliances are shifting. This war is causing these unpredictable ripple effects. The old lines are getting blurred, and this whole alliance could really shake up the balance of power, not just in the region, but globally. It's a big deal, and something everyone who is following this conflict needs to understand.
And just when you think it can't get any more complex, we have Trump's recent election victory hanging over everything.
Right, that adds another layer of uncertainty for sure. Trump has been pretty vocal about wanting a quick end to the war, even if it means Ukraine has to make concessions.
Which is causing a lot of anxiety, I bet.
Oh, absolutely. Ukraine's allies are worried that the crucial support they've been getting from the U.S. might dry up under a Trump administration.
But couldn't that unpredictability with Trump actually make Putin think twice about escalating things? I mean, there's no way to know how he'd react.
That's a good point. Trump's foreign policy has always been, shall we say, a bit unpredictable. And that could act as a deterrent to some extent, but at the same time, it's impossible to predict what he'll do.
So it's a double-edged sword.
Exactly. It raises serious questions about the future of U.S. involvement in this war. Will a different approach, Trump's approach, help or hurt Ukraine's fight? It's really up in the air.
So we've got a potential shift in U.S. policy, this unexpected alliance with North Korea, and a war that doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon. It's a lot to take in.
It really is. And the stakes couldn't be higher. We're talking about the future of Ukraine, the stability of Europe, and maybe even a total reshaping of global alliances.
Feels like we're at a turning point. But which way things will turn, who knows?
And that's what makes this situation so fascinating, so critical to understand.
We've been talking a lot about the big picture stuff, like the military strategy and the political maneuvering. But I think it's important to step back for a minute and think about the human cost of this war.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy to get caught up in the geopolitics of it all and forget that there are real people whose lives are being torn apart by this conflict.
Millions of Ukrainians have had their lives completely upended, their homes destroyed, families separated, forced to flee their country. It's heartbreaking.
It really is. And it's so important to keep those individual stories in mind.
The article mentions this one incident that really stuck with me. A Russian missile attack hit a residential building in Sumy, a city near the border. 8 civilians were killed, just ordinary people going about their lives.
It's a stark reminder that this isn't just some abstract conflict playing out on a map. It's a brutal reality for so many people.
And it makes the need for a peaceful resolution even more urgent. But finding a lasting peace in this situation, that's going to be incredibly difficult.
Yeah, there's so much distrust on both sides, so many competing interests.
Right, like what does a just and lasting peace even look like in this context?
It's a question that's on everyone's minds, from diplomats to world leaders. And there are no easy answers. Any peace agreement would have to address so many complex issues. Territorial integrity, security guarantees, accountability for war crimes.
And it would require a willingness to compromise, which, let's face it, isn't exactly in abundance right now.
Exactly. But we have to keep striving for that peaceful resolution, even if it seems distant.
The article also talks about the amount of military aid the U.S. has given to Ukraine, over $56 billion since the war began. That's an incredible amount of money.
It really shows how committed the U.S. is to supporting Ukraine's fight. But even with that level of support, there's this ongoing debate about whether the U.S. should be doing even more.
Specifically, providing Ukraine with more advanced weapons, right?
Right. Some people argue that it's the only way to really deter Russia, maybe even turn the tide of the war in Ukraine's favor, give them the tools they need to defend themselves.
But others worry that sending more powerful weapons would just escalate the conflict, potentially even pull NATO into a direct confrontation with Russia.
It's a tough call. You want to support Ukraine, but you also don't want to trigger a wider war.
It feels like whatever decision is made, there are going to be huge consequences.
Absolutely. And this isn't just about military tactics and political strategy. There are serious moral and ethical dimensions to this conflict that we can't ignore.
Yeah, like Zelensky criticized what he called attempts at appeasement with Putin.
Which raises this really difficult question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with an aggressor, someone like Putin, without emboldening them or risking a larger conflict?
It's a classic dilemma in international relations, and there's no easy answer.
Especially when you consider the long and complicated history between Russia and Ukraine. This current conflict, it's not some isolated incident. It's part of this much bigger historical narrative. Centuries of cooperation and conflict, shared heritage and rivalry.
So it's way more complex than just good versus evil or democracy versus authoritarianism.
Exactly. Those elements are there, of course, but it's so much more nuanced than that. There are deep-seated historical grievances, cultural and linguistic divides, economic ties. It's all tangled up together.
You can't understand this war without understanding the history behind it.
Right. And any attempt to solve this conflict has to take all of that into account. There's no simple solution. It's going to take a lot of careful diplomacy and a deep understanding of the region's history to find a path to lasting peace.
It feels like we're just scratching the surface here. With every layer we peel back, there's another level of complexity, and we haven't even touched on the potential for this conflict to escalate beyond Ukraine's borders.
It's a scary thought, but a real possibility. The fact that we now have North Korean troops involved, fighting on the Russian side, that's a clear sign that this war could easily spread.
And then there's the nightmare scenario, a direct clash between NATO and Russia. Most experts say it's unlikely, but you can't rule it out entirely.
The stakes are just so incredibly high, not only for Ukraine and Russia, but for the entire world. This isn't just about one country's survival anymore.
The article mentions this idea of an interconnected world, how conflicts in one place can have these ripple effects that are felt everywhere.
It's so true. Look at what's happening already. Energy prices are soaring, supply chains are disrupted, there's this uncertainty in the global financial markets. It's impacting everyone, not just the countries directly involved in the fighting.
Which is why it's so important for everyone to stay informed, to understand what's happening in Ukraine and why it matters.
It's not just about being aware of the latest headlines. It's about being able to engage in these complex discussions about the potential consequences.
Because these are global issues, they impact all of us.
Exactly. We can't afford to be complacent, to just sit back and watch this unfold. It's a time to be active, to be engaged citizens, to learn about what's going on, to challenge our assumptions, to hold our leaders accountable.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all of this, to just want to tune it out.
I get that. It can be really heavy, especially when you start thinking about all the potential consequences. But that's all the more reason to stay engaged, to not give in to despair or apathy.
We have to have hope, right? To believe that our actions, even small ones, can make a difference.
Absolutely. Hope isn't about ignoring the reality of the situation. It's about acknowledging the challenges while still believing in the possibility of positive change. It's about having faith in our collective ability to create a better future.
And that brings us to this idea that peace isn't just the absence of war. It's about actively building a world where conflicts are resolved peacefully, where human rights are respected, where everyone feels safe and secure.
It's a vision worth fighting for, even when things seem incredibly bleak. It starts with recognizing our shared humanity, even amidst conflict. It's about choosing dialogue and diplomacy over violence and division.
Well, this deep dive has definitely given us a lot to think about. It's clear that the situation in Ukraine is far from over, and the choices made by world leaders in the coming weeks and months will have a huge impact on the future, not just for Ukraine, but for the entire world.
It's a reminder that we live in an interconnected world, that peace is fragile, and that we all have a role to play in building a better future.
This has been incredibly informative, but like you said before, it's just a starting point. We've only scratched the surface here, and there's so much more to learn and explore.
Exactly. We encourage everyone listening to keep digging, to stay informed, to talk to others about these issues. Don't let the conversation end here.
The more informed and engaged we all are, the better equipped we'll be to navigate this increasingly complex world and to contribute to making it a more peaceful and just place for everyone.
Well said. So stay curious, stay engaged, and stay informed.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a really thought-provoking conversation, and we appreciate you being a part of it. We'll be back soon with another fascinating topic to explore together.